Now, the question then is, why does this matter? Why should we care about China's non-compliance, if that's what it is, if it's non-compliance? I think it is. That's my first point. But the second question, and which leads to my second point, is why should we care about the non-compliance of a party to the NPT? It seems to me that when you look at the treaty in its wider setting, you have to, among the questions that we need to ask, what are we going to replace it with? What will fill the gap or the void or the vacuum? If the NPT is allowed through sort of desuetude or just being ignored, if it's left by the wayside, what happens then? And I think maybe a decade ago that wasn't as a particularly urgent question, but I think now it actually is. I think with the entry into force of the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, the TPNW, we actually have a serious problem. And I think in the defense community, the security-minded community of security-minded thinkers, it's easy to dismiss the so-called banned treaty, the TPNW. It's really very much wishful thinking. It has unrealistic expectations. It's never going to work, and so on. Well, actually, that's the very problem. Combined with the attractiveness in many important constituencies, including in many important countries on which the United States relies as allies and partners, TPNW has a lot of traction. It actually looks like it's rather gaining traction. Take as a case in point the Australian government, which switched from one coalition to a different party, in power recently. It had heretofore casted votes in the General Assembly of the United Nations against the TPNW. Okay. But now it abstains on the TPNW. Not the end of the world in itself. I'm pointing to that not for its own sake, but for what it reflects. It reflects that there is a more than latent tendency in important constituencies in important countries to particular option, the TPNW, a really serious look. And you harken back to the 1980s when almost every security decision we took was belabored by a disarmament movement in Western Europe, as well as in some other places. And it was really quite an additional burden for security diplomats, if we could call ourselves that. But diplomats responsible for security affairs had a challenge in that, which was not real. And I sense that reading the tea leaves on the TPNW, if a vacuum arises because we simply stop caring about the NPT and stop taking it seriously, it's TPNW stuff that's going to rush in to fill the vacuum. I think that's going to be pretty challenging for us. And I'm not sure we want to just let that happen. And also, when you look at the Chinese challenge, the challenge that the PRC has laid down, it makes sense to use every tool in the toolkit to raise awareness amongst allies and important constituencies, and then really, actually, in good faith, to do our best to live up to the expectations in Article 6. One of the things in the recent paper I've been working on that I've tried to do is sort of harvest good ideas, because they're out there, about what we could negotiate about and how we could refresh the negotiation agenda under Article 6, because it's not going to be very convincing if we say China isn't negotiating and China has violated the treaty and that's bad, plus China is attempting through this very rapid qualitative and quantitative buildup to overturn the entire strategic environment and thereby produce a fait accompli. That's I think those are points to be made, but it's all going to ring hollow. It will sit ill in our mouth if we haven't got some constructive agenda with which to answer the challenge that we've identified. So identify China as a challenge, but then come forward with something affirmative, something constructive. And again, the ideas are there. People have proposed important constructive ideas about negotiation, but I think we are at a point where it'd be helpful to start synthesizing that and putting it in one place, saying, look, here are the possibilities for a future Article 6 agenda. Anyway, so I mean that's the state of my thinking in a nutshell right now about Article 6 and why China is I think we very well could argue, very well would be it's well within our rights to observe that China's in breach of Article 6, but then also I think there are good reasons for doing that. And